My name is Isabella Quinn. I am 33 years old. My boss had promised me the vice president position after I led the biggest client acquisition in our firm's history, only to announce in the all-hands meeting that Marcus would be taking it instead. The betrayal slammed into me like ice water, my years of loyalty and late nights vanishing in one sentence. The Hartford conference room buzzed with applause as my boss, Richard Harlan, clapped Marcus on the back. I sat there throat tight, the pain so sharp I could barely breathe. My boss never even looked my way. In that crushing moment, I quietly closed my notebook and made a silent decision to stop pouring my soul into a place that clearly never valued it. But that choice was about to open doors I never expected. If you've ever had someone in power take credit for everything you built and leave you feeling completely erased, leave a comment below. I'm sharing this because maybe my story can help someone else find the strength to walk away before it's too late. Now let me take you back to where it truly began. Looking back, the signs had been there for years, but I ignored them because I believed hard work would speak for itself. I started at Harlan Marketing right out of college, fresh-faced and eager in our sleek downtown Hartford offices overlooking the Connecticut River. My boss always said I was his most reliable account manager. He'd lean in during team meetings and tell me privately, "Isabella, this place needs people like you who actually deliver." Those words kept me going through 60-hour weeks and last-minute client crises. Marcus Hale, on the other hand, had this effortless charm that my boss seemed to love. He'd stroll in with coffee for everyone and crack jokes while I stayed late finalizing decks. I didn't resent it at first. I told myself promotions came to those who earned them quietly. Then came the Thompson Global account. I spent 6 months researching their needs, building the strategy from scratch, and closing the deal that added $2 million in annual revenue. My boss called me into his office the day the contract signed and shook my hand. "Vice President is yours once we present this to the board," he said with that confident smile. I floated home that night, believing everything was finally falling into place. The morning of the big client pitch, I arrived early with my polished presentation loaded on the laptop. The entire senior team was there, including Elena Vargas, my coworker, who always had my back in the trenches. She gave me a thumbs up across the table as I sat up. My boss strode in, last coffee in hand, and nodded at Marcus, like they shared some private understanding. I started walking through the slides, detailing every insight I had uncovered. Halfway through, my boss stood up abruptly. "Excellent foundation, Isabella, but let me show the team the real vision." He took the clicker from my hand, flipped to a new section, and began presenting my exact strategies as if they had sprung from his own mind. "This is the kind of bold thinking Marcus brings to the table," he announced, waving toward my rival. "Effective immediately, he's stepping into the vice president role to lead this account forward." The room erupted in polite applause. Marcus grinned like he'd earned every word. I sat frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Elena's eyes widened in shock across the table, but no one spoke up. My boss never glanced my direction. The pain wasn't just the lost promotion, it was the casual way he erased me in front of everyone who mattered. When the meeting ended, I waited until the room cleared and approached him. "Richard, can we talk about what just happened?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Isabella, you're great at the details, but leadership requires vision. Marcus has it. You're reliable, but reliable doesn't move the needle." His words landed like a slap wrapped in politeness. I left his office numb and headed straight to HR. Thomas Riley, the head of human resources, listened to my account with a neutral expression. "Look, these decisions are at the executive level," he said, tapping his pen. "Your boss has full authority here. I suggest focusing on your current projects instead of dwelling on this. No investigation, no follow-up. Just a polite dismissal that made me feel even smaller." Elena caught me in the hallway afterward, pulling me into the break room. "That was wrong," she whispered fiercely. "I saw everything. You built that account. If you need someone to back you up in writing, I'm here." Her support was the only warmth in an otherwise freezing day, but even she knew the odds were stacked against us. That afternoon, I typed my resignation letter with shaking hands. I didn't storm out or make a scene. I simply emailed it to my boss and packed my desk while the office buzzed around me. Marcus stopped by once, offering a half-hearted sorry it worked out this way, but his eyes said he had won. My boss never replied personally. He had Thomas send a generic severance note the next day. Walking out of that building for the last time felt like stepping off a cliff, but I knew staying would have broken me completely. The next months were a blur of freelance gigs and quiet evenings in my small Hartford apartment. I questioned everything, my skills, my judgment, even why I had trusted my boss for so long. Sleep came hard, and some nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had thrown away my entire career over pride. Then one rainy afternoon, I attended a local veteran transition workshop at the community center downtown, mostly to get out of the house. That's where I first noticed Alexander Voss. He wasn't flashy, just a tall man in a worn jacket coordinating panels with quiet authority. Later, I learned he had commanded an intelligence unit overseas before shifting to helping service members rebuild civilian lives. We started talking over bad coffee during a break. He listened without trying to fix me, which felt rare after years of corporate performance reviews. "Sounds like you built something real, and someone else claimed the spotlight," he said simply. His words didn't pity me. They respected the work I had done. Over the following weeks, our conversations grew longer. He never pushed, never demanded. When he finally asked me to dinner, it was on a quiet porch with takeout Thai food and stories that made me laugh for the first time in months. 6 months later, he proposed on that same porch with a simple ring on a chain. "I don't want to rescue you," he told me softly. "I just want to stand beside you while you build whatever comes next." I said yes with tears in my eyes, and we kept the wedding small, just us and a handful of close friends. Together we co-founded Pathfinder Support, a nonprofit helping professional women transition out of toxic workplaces. I handled strategy and programming, while my husband managed policy and veteran partnerships. Within 2 years, we had programs running across 3 counties, grants flowing in, and real women telling us our work gave them back their confidence. Elena stayed in touch from the old firm, occasionally sending me updates and cheering our growth. Thomas, true to form, never reached out. Life felt steady for the first time in years. The old wounds had scarred over, and I rarely thought about my former boss or the firm that had cast me aside. Then the white envelope arrived in the mail 4 years after I walked out. It was an invitation to Harlan Marketing's 20th anniversary gala, honoring my boss, Richard Harlan, as founder and visionary. No +1 mentioned, just my name printed boldly under the guest list. My stomach twisted when I read it. Part of me wanted to shred it and forget the whole thing. Another part, the quieter, stronger part, wondered if I could finally sit in that room without shrinking. I showed the card to my husband that evening. He raised an eyebrow and asked simply, "Do you want to go?" I hesitated because the truth was I didn't know, but something deeper pulled at me. I told him I thought I needed to close the door for good. He nodded once. "Then I'll be right beside you." The night of the gala arrived faster than I expected. I chose a simple black dress and my grandmother's small gold necklace. My husband wore his formal navy jacket with the subtle insignia of his former command. Nothing flashy, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. As we pulled up to the glittering venue on the riverfront, the valet greeted him with a respectful "Commander Voss." My husband offered a short nod. The kid's eyes widened in recognition. I squeezed my husband's hand tighter, feeling a mix of nerves and quiet pride. We stepped inside to the sound of clinking glasses and familiar laughter. Elena spotted me first from across the room and hurried over, hugging me tightly. "You look incredible," she whispered. "Be careful tonight." My boss has been bragging about his visionary leadership all week. Her warning sent a small chill through me. We hadn't even reached the main table when I heard my former boss's voice booming near the stage. He was holding court, recounting the Thomson Global win as if he had single-handedly engineered it. Marcus stood beside him, nodding along like the golden successor. My pulse quickened. I hadn't come for revenge, but standing there, I realized the old hurt still simmered just beneath the surface. My husband rested a steady hand on my back. "Take your time," he murmured. I nodded and stepped forward, ready to face whatever the night held. Little did I know the next few hours would force me into the hardest decision I had ever made. I nodded and stepped forward into the glittering ballroom, my husband right beside me with that calm strength that always made me feel anchored no matter how shaky the ground felt. The evening was already humming with chatter and soft jazz from the live band near the riverfront windows, but I kept my eyes straight ahead on the cluster of senior executives gathered by the stage. That's when my boss spotted me. He broke off from his conversation mid-laugh, turning with that polished smile that never quite hid the edge underneath. "Well, well, if it isn't Isabella Quinn," he called out loud enough for the nearest tables to glance our way. "Back after all these years. I heard you're running some little non-profit now. How adorable. Still playing in the sandbox while the grown-ups handle real business, I suppose." The jab landed exactly as he meant it to sharp and public, reminding everyone within earshot that I had once been part of the inner circle and had chosen to leave it behind. Marcus stood right there beside him, grinning, like he'd scripted the moment himself. My boss didn't even pause for breath. He gestured grandly toward the crowd as if I were some kind of exhibit. "You know, folks, Isabella here was solid on the details back in the day. Reliable, sure. But leadership, that takes vision. That's why Marcus stepped up so seamlessly after she walked away." A few awkward chuckles rippled through the group, and I felt the old familiar heat rise in my chest. My boss leaned in a fraction closer, voice dropping just enough to sound intimate but still carrying. "Tell me, Isabella, does it sting knowing the Thompson account kept growing without you? Or did you finally accept that some people are just support staff at heart?" Elena appeared at my side. In an instant, her face flushed with quiet fury. She had always been the one colleague who saw through the games, and tonight was no exception. "Richard, that's not fair, and you know it," she said firmly, her tone steady even as her hands clenched at her sides. "Isabella built the foundation for that entire client relationship. Without her research, none of us would have closed it." My boss waved her comment away with a dismissive chuckle, the kind that made it clear he was enjoying the spotlight. Elena always the defender, loyal to a fault. But let's not rewrite history here. Facts are facts. Some people shine in the background, others, like Marcus, take the wheel. He turned back to me with that same cutting smile. "Though if your little nonprofit is struggling for funding, I could always find a spot for you on a consulting basis. Nothing permanent, of course, just enough hours to keep you relevant. My terms, naturally." The offer hung in the air like a trap disguised as charity, and I could feel the eyes of the entire circle waiting for my reaction. Before I could answer, another voice cut in from the side. Claire Montgomery, one of our longtime client representatives who had worked closely with me on several campaigns years ago, stepped forward from the group. She had aged gracefully and carried the same no-nonsense presence I remembered. "Isabella, it's wonderful to see you," she said warmly, ignoring my boss completely for a moment. "Your strategies on our projects were the reason we stayed with the firm as long as we did. The board still talks about the turnaround you engineered single-handedly." Her genuine praise felt like a lifeline, but it only seemed to irritate my boss more. He pivoted toward her instantly, his tone shifting to something smoother, yet still laced with control. "Claire, always good to have your perspective, but the real growth happened once Marcus took over leadership. Numbers don't lie. Still, if Isabella needs a reference or something small, I'm sure we can arrange it." I stood there absorbing the layered insults each one delivered, with that polished professionalism he wielded like a weapon. My husband remained quiet beside me, but I caught the subtle way several guests nodded respectfully toward him, recognizing the insignia on his jacket from his command days. No one dared address him directly, yet his presence alone seemed to shift the energy in the room just enough to make my boss's jabs feel slightly less absolute. Still, The tension kept building. My boss wasn't finished. He signaled to one of the event staff, and a microphone appeared in his hand as if by magic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the wider crowd, voice booming now with theatrical flair, "we have a special guest tonight. Isabella Quinn, one of our former account managers, who helped lay the groundwork for what we are today. Let's give her a round of applause for knowing when to step aside and let the real leaders shine." The applause was polite but scattered, and I could feel the humiliation settling in like a weight on my shoulders. What happened next caught me completely off guard. As the clapping faded, my boss lowered the microphone slightly and turned back to me with a glint in his eye that sent a chill down my spine. "Between us, Isabella, I've kept tabs on your nonprofit. Pathfinder support, right? Impressive on paper. But word around the industry is that several key grants are tied to our network. One phone call from me and those doors could close overnight. So here's a friendly suggestion. Come back part-time on my conditions. Help train the new team. Show everyone you learned your lesson about ambition. Or, well, you understand how these things work." The threat was veiled in corporate politeness, but the meaning was crystal clear. He had just publicly dangled the future of everything my husband and I had built together, like it was his to snatch away. Elena's eyes met mine in silent warning, and Claire Montgomery looked visibly uncomfortable, murmuring something about needing to check on another table. My husband's hand rested lightly on my back, steady as ever, but even he couldn't shield me from the reality sinking in. My boss stood there waiting for an answer, that same superior smile never wavering, while the entire gala seemed to hold its breath around us. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught, because in that single moment I realized the painful choice staring me down: fight back and risk watching our entire nonprofit crumble under his influence, or swallow my pride one more time and return to the very place that had erased me years ago. And just when I thought the night couldn't twist any tighter, my boss leaned in again with one final quiet jab meant only for me. "Clock's ticking. Isabella. Some people never learn. Others finally do." The weight of that ultimatum pressed down harder than anything I had faced in years, leaving me frozen between the life I had rebuilt and the one my boss still believed he controlled completely. "Busy?" The weight of that ultimatum pressed down harder than anything I had faced in years, leaving me frozen between the life I had rebuilt and the one my boss still believed he controlled completely. I took a slow breath and met his eyes across the glittering ballroom, my voice steady even though my hands trembled at my sides. "Richard, I built Pathfinder support from nothing because I refused to stay erased in places like this. I said clearly enough for Elena and Claire to hear. Your little sandbox comment. It tells me nothing has changed. You never valued the work. You just needed someone reliable to prop up Marcus while he took the credit." My boss's polished smile tightened into something colder, the kind of look that said he was done pretending. Marcus shifted beside him, that smug grin fading just a fraction, as if he sensed the room tilting. Elena stepped closer, her arm brushing mine in silent solidarity, while Claire Montgomery crossed her arms and watched with open disapproval. "Isabella, you always had potential," my boss replied smoothly, but the edge in his tone cut deep. "Potential is cute in junior roles. Leadership demands loyalty, not this stubborn independence. Come back on my terms, part-time consultant. Reporting directly to Marcus, or watch those grants dry up. One call to the foundation board and your little non-profit experiment ends tonight. Choose wisely." The threat landed like a quiet explosion in the middle of the gala. I felt my husband's hand tighten gently on my back, his quiet presence the only thing keeping me grounded. Before I could answer, Claire leaned in with a sharp whisper that carried just far enough. "Richard, I've sat on that board for years. You've been quietly lobbying against Pathfinder's funding applications for months now. I saw the emails. This isn't new. This is personal." The hidden truth hit me square in the chest. My boss hadn't just forgotten me. He had been actively undermining everything I built because I dared to leave and succeed without him. Elena's eyes widened in shock. Thomas Riley from HR is here tonight, she murmured urgently. He's over by the bar if we get him on record. But Thomas appeared at the edge of our circle. Right then, his neutral HR smile already in place. Folks, let's keep this professional, he said quietly, stepping between us like a buffer. Richard has full discretion on network partnerships. Isabella, I'd advise against escalating. These things have consequences for everyone involved. My boss gave a satisfied nod as if the pieces had fallen exactly where he wanted them. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice laced with that same casual cruelty. Face it, Isabella, some people are meant to support the vision, not own it. You walked away once. Don't make the same mistake twice. I looked at my husband, at Elena's fierce loyalty, at Claire's quiet outrage, and something inside me finally snapped into place. The painful choice crystallized right there under the chandelier lights. I could swallow my pride, return part-time, and maybe save the grants. Or I could stand firm and watch the organization my husband and I had poured our hearts into begin to crumble. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but clear as glass. No, Richard, I won't come back. Not for you, not for Marcus, not for any grant. You can pull the strings. You can take what we built. But you will never erase me again. The words felt like freedom and loss all at once. My boss didn't blink. He simply pulled out his phone right there at the gala, tapped a number, and stepped aside with a soft chuckle. Foundation Director Richard Harlan. Yes, about those Pathfinder renewals. Effective immediately. Harlan Marketing is withdrawing all support and references. Handle it. The call ended in under 30 seconds. Elena gasped. Claire shook her head slowly. Thomas Riley just looked away, already distancing himself. My husband pulled me closer, his voice low and steady. We'll figure it out together. You did the right thing. But I already knew the cost. Within the week, 2 major grants were denied, forcing us to scale back 3 programs and lay off 2 part-time staff we had fought so hard to hire. The nonprofit didn't collapse completely, but it shrank painfully, and the momentum we had built over 2 years slowed to a crawl. I walked out of that gala with my head high and my heart heavier than it had been in years. No dramatic scene, no final applause. Just me and my husband slipping through the riverfront doors, while my boss continued his speech inside as if nothing had happened. Marcus never lost his promotion. Elena stayed at the firm, but kept sending me quiet updates. Thomas Riley never followed up. Claire Montgomery promised to advocate behind the scenes, yet we both knew the network was too strong. Back in our quiet Hartford apartment that night, I sat on the porch where my husband had proposed and stared at the simple ring on my finger. The desert walks and veteran workshops that once felt like rebirth now carried the weight of what I had sacrificed. My boss remained exactly where he always had, untouched, powerful, still running the show. I didn't get justice. I didn't get closure in the way movies promise. I got the painful truth that sometimes choosing yourself means watching part of your dream suffer, so you don't lose the rest of who you are. Pathfinder support still helps women, but smaller now, more careful. My husband and I keep building anyway, 1 grant at a time, because giving up would have meant letting my boss win twice. The regret lingers on quiet evenings, but so does the quiet strength that no one can take away. I finally stopped trying to earn space in rooms that never wanted me there, and that even in defeat feels like the only victory that truly matters. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever faced a choice where standing up for yourself meant losing something you built with your own hands, what would you have done? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories remind me I'm not alone in this.